The Valley Current.
Picture the scene. Aspen, summer of 2026. And this is an invitation-only retreat. So, the kind of room filled with global leaders in foreign affairs, economics, entertainment, like the absolute upper echelon of influence.
Right.
And the air is thin, the stakes are high, and sitting side by side at a dinner table are two men who represent, honestly, the absolute extreme opposite ends of the modern longevity debate.
It really is a perfectly cinematic collision of worldviews. I mean, you couldn't script a better juxtaposition if you tried.
Exactly. So on one side of the table, you have Bryan Johnson.
Yeah.
He's the tech entrepreneur, the centimillionaire, who famously sold his payment processing company for like $800 million back in 2013.
Right.
And then he made this rather unique career pivot. He decided to make his own body his full-time job.
Literally his job.
Yeah. He reportedly spends $2 million a year trying to become the healthiest person on the planet. He's waging this very public, very expensive, very highly engineered war on human mortality.
And sitting right next to him is Dr. Ezekiel J. Emanuel.
Oh, man.
Right. And he is a former Obama-era health policy advisor, a very prominent physician, an oncologist, and a bioethicist. And, he is someone who has famously written an entire essay arguing that he would be perfectly content to die at the age of 75.
Right. So you have the man spending millions to try and live forever, basically sitting elbow to elbow with the prominent doctor who says, 75 is plenty.
Yeah.
And they even finish the salad course when Dr. Emanuel turns to Johnson and asks the question that stopped the entire table cold. He says, and this is a direct quote, "I don't see the point. I don't see the purpose. Why do you want to live to 150?
Wow. It's the ultimate dinner party provocation.
It really is.
I mean, it forces the issue from the biological directly to the existential in just one sentence.
And the response. Total deafening silence.
Just nothing.
Nothing. Emanuel later recalled that Johnson didn't say anything at all. It just caught him completely up short. Emanuel actually called it the most interesting part of the entire evening.
Because that silence, that hesitation, when you're forced to articulate the actual why behind all of this extreme life extension, that is the exact tension that our source material is exploring today. We are looking at this brilliant piece of analysis that basically tries to answer that exact question.
And this deep dive comes to us from a rather unexpected place, I have to say.
Yeah, it really does.
It's a special issue newsletter from a family wealth planning law firm, of all things.
Yeah.
It's called the Healthy 100-Year Series.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that they're looking at health not just as a clinical or a medical issue, but as the ultimate form of intergenerational capital. They call it the health quotient, or HQ. In their view, it is the bedrock. It's the foundation upon which all other forms of family wealth, like financial, intellectual, emotional, are actually built.
Which is a remarkably pragmatic lens. They aren't looking at health as this theoretical biology experiment in the Silicon Valley lab. They are looking at what actually works, what actually compounds over generations for families who are trying to build lasting legacies. Because, you can't mentor your grandchildren or run a family business if you aren't physically and cognitively present.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to use their analysis to explore this really razor-thin line.
Right.
The line between cultivating a long, vibrant health span, which I think everyone listening can agree is a great goal, and crossing over into this toxic, obsessive war on mortality that might actually damage the very life it's trying to extend.
It has the difference between prudent self-maintenance and an obsession that entirely loses sight of the human experience.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to talk about what Bryan Johnson's routine actually entails to understand why this is such a powerful cautionary tale.
Yeah, we really do.
This isn't just someone taking a daily multivitamin, eating a little less red meat, and, jogging on the weekends.
Not even close. His regimen is called Project Blueprint. And when we say he spends $2 million a year, that translates into an incredibly punishing, exacting lifestyle.
Yeah.
He swallows over 100 supplements a day. Every single calorie of his diet is meticulously measured and restricted.
He literally calls himself the most measured human being in history.
Right.
He tracks every conceivable biomarker constantly. We are talking daily weigh-ins, body temperature, blood glucose, resting heart rate, deep sleep, body fat, MRIs, regular blood panels, just constant.
Constant. And perhaps most famously, he engaged in literal multi-generational plasma exchanges.
Oh, the plasma cells.
Yeah. He received blood plasma from his teenage son, and he gave his own plasma to his father. The idea was to physically, mechanically transfer youth between generations through an IV line.
Unbelievable.
And the overarching slogan for all of this, the mandate he lives by, is simply, don't die.
Don't die. That is a heavy, almost paralyzing mandate to wake up to every single morning.
It is.
But then we get to the plot twist. A few months after that dinner in Aspen, in the summer of 2026, Johnson announces some bad news.
Yeah.
The world's most monitored human being reveals that he has a progressing disease, specifically autoimmune gastritis.
Yes. And his framing on the social media platform X was quite vivid. He said, my stomach is eating itself.
Oh.
And if you read the thread, you could hear this profound sense of betrayal in his follow-up comments. He said, I eat whole foods, I exercise every day, and I don't do bad things.
It's almost like he felt he had negotiated a contract with the universe.
Right.
Like, I do all the right things, I spend the money, I suffer the restriction, therefore I am exempt from biology.
Exactly.
He even posted a tweet right after that, said, been thinking things over and wonder if I've taken this whole longevity thing too far. Now, he later claimed that was just deadpan humor. He talked about flying too close to the sun like Icarus, but the raw arithmetic remains. He had a progressing autoimmune disease.
So let's look at the medical mechanics of what actually went wrong there, because understanding autoimmune gastritis, or AIG, is crucial to understanding the flaw in his tracking model.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So AIG is a chronic, organ-specific autoimmune disease. What happens is that the body's immune system, specifically the T cells, which are supposed to fight off foreign invaders, they turn rogue.
Oh, no.
They get confused and begin progressively destroying a very specific type of cell in the stomach lining called parietal cells.
Wait, so if the T cells are destroying these parietal cells, I'm assuming those cells are doing something structurally vital for the stomach? Is that like acid production? Because you hear about stomach acid issues all the time.
Spot on. Parietal cells do two incredibly important things. First, as you guessed, they produce the hydrochloric acid that digests your food.
Okay.
Second, they produce a protein called intrinsic factor. So when the rogue T cells destroy these parietal cells, it sets off a very predictable and very damaging biological cascade.
The dominoes start falling.
Precisely. The first domino is the loss of that stomach acid. Without enough acid, the stomach simply cannot break down and properly absorb iron from food.
Oh.
And this is where the story gets really illuminating regarding Johnson's intense measurement protocol, because the earliest clinical sign of this disease is often just chronically low iron, specifically low ferritin levels, on a routine blood panel.
Wait. The source notes that Johnson had stubbornly low ferritin for 11 straight years.
11 years.
11 years. So he was doing extreme dietary tweaks, taking exotic supplements, basically moving heaven and earth trying to fix a single number on a spreadsheet. And the whole time, his stomach was quietly under attack.
Because the measurement itself was acting as a blinder. He was treating a symptom as if it were the root cause.
Right.
And the biological cascade continues from there. Remember that second thing the parietal cells make, the protein called intrinsic factor?
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Without it, the body simply cannot absorb vitamin B12. That leads to pernicious anemia, severe brain fog, and neurological issues. And to compensate for the total lack of acid, the body starts surging a hormone called gastrin.
Because it's trying to force the stomach to wake up and do its job.
Exactly. The body is screaming for acid. But decades of this inflammation, this continuous hormone surging, this cellular remodeling of the stomach lining, it eventually leads to a roughly threefold increased risk of stomach cancer.
Oh, wow.
That is the ultimate severe clinical consequence of AIG.
That is heavy. So the guy tracking absolutely everything missed the root cause for over a decade. It reminds me of someone who bolts like 500 high-tech sensors onto their car engine, right?
Yeah.
They wire up the exhaust, the transmission, the fuel injectors to the supercomputer in the passenger seat, but they completely ignore the standard check engine light flashing right on the dashboard.
That is a perfect analogy.
He had the low iron, but he kept trying to biohack the symptom instead of popping the hood to find the disease.
He was generating a massive, unprecedented haystack of data, and this crucial, life-threatening needle sat right in the middle of it, unremarked upon, for 11 years.
Unbelievable.
And what finally caught it Not a wearable tech device, not a futuristic plasma swap. It was an endoscopy and a biopsy, a completely standard, conventional medical procedure. As Johnson himself admitted, quote, "When you measure, you find stuff."
Right. Well, okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because we do have to be fair to his methodology.
Yep.
But didn't his extreme measurement at least help him catch the cancer risk early? I mean, now that he knows about the AIG, he can be monitored, right?
That is a completely fair point. And to be clear, the source emphasizes this as well. An early diagnosis of AIG is genuinely worth having precisely because it puts you into an endoscopic surveillance program.
Okay.
He can be watched closely for that cancer risk, and early detection of stomach cancer saves lives. We also need to be crystal clear on another fairness point, which is that his extreme biohacking almost certainly did not cause this autoimmune disease.
Right. Nobody is suggesting that taking 100 pills a day or drinking green smoothies made his stomach eat itself.
Exactly. AIG has no known definitive root cause. However, there is a massive medical clue hidden in his history. The disease clusters heavily with other autoimmune conditions, particularly thyroid disease.
Oh, really?
The association is so strong in the medical literature it actually has a name, thyrogastric syndrome. And Bryan Johnson was diagnosed with autoimmune hypothyroidism when he was 21 years old.
Oh, wow. Long before he ever made a dime, let alone started Project Blueprint.
2 decades before. So the most medically sound, rational explanation is that this was always brewing in his immune system.
Yeah.
As one epidemiologist pointed out when looking at this case, you really can't biohack your way completely out of disease or death. Biology always gets a vote.
Biology gets a vote. I love that.
Yeah.
So if his extreme routine didn't necessarily cause his stomach issue, we can let him off the hook for that.
Right.
But it does force us to look at the actual risks of his methods, which brings us to a concept in medicine called iatrogenic risk.
Yes, and this is a fundamental concept that anyone interested in longevity needs to understand. Iatrogenic risk simply means harm that is caused by the medical intervention itself.
Wow.
The treatment actually becomes the threat. And the newsletter dives deeply into how the extreme longevity toolkit, the very things these biohackers are spending millions on, is absolutely riddled with iatrogenic risk.
It's the danger of more. Like, more isn't always better. Sometimes more is just dangerous.
Let's walk through some of these interventions, because the contrast between what these biohackers promise and what the clinical reality shows is pretty startling.
It really is.
Let's start with rapamycin. Now, this is a heavy-duty drug usually used for organ transplant patients to stop their bodies from rejecting a new kidney, right?
Correct. It's a powerful immunosuppressant. But in the longevity community, it has been heavily used off-label.
Okay.
The reason is that, in some animal models, like mice and yeast, it showed promise in mimicking the effects of caloric restriction and potentially slowing cellular aging down. So the promise is basically a fountain of youth pill. But what was the reality for Johnson?
The reality, even for Johnson, who ran arguably the most aggressive, heavily monitored rapamycin protocol in the entire industry, was negative. He quit taking the drug entirely in 2024.
Really?
Yeah. He cited a cascade of side effects: skin and soft tissue infections, abnormal lipid profiles, skewed glucose levels, and an elevated resting heart rate.
Wait, pause on that. He's taking an immunosuppressant to live longer, and he ends up getting skin infections because his immune system is depressed. That seems entirely counterproductive.
It is, but most damning of all, a preprint study evaluating his specific biological data suggested the drug might actually have accelerated his aging across 16 different epigenetic clocks.
Okay, for those of us who aren't biohackers with a PhD in molecular biology, what exactly is an epigenetic clock? Are we talking about the DNA itself changing?
It's a great question. Think of your DNA as the hardware of a computer. That doesn't change.
Right.
But the epigenome is like the software. It is a layer of chemical tags that tells your DNA which genes to turn on and which to turn off. Over time, as we age, that software gets corrupted.
I see.
An epigenetic clock measures that corruption to determine your biological age versus your chronological age in calendar years. So Johnson took this drug to slow his biological aging, and the clock suggested the drug actually made his software corrupt faster.
So he paid a fortune to age faster and get skin infections.
Yeah.
That is the definition of iatrogenic risk. But what about something simpler? Megadose antioxidants. This isn't just billionaires. I mean, a lot of people go to the pharmacy and take massive amounts of vitamin E or beta-carotene thinking, well, free radicals cause aging, so more antioxidants must be better to neutralize them.
What's fascinating here is that the clinical evidence completely inverts that conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
The source cites the definitive Cochrane meta-analysis on this topic. And we need to emphasize, this wasn't a small, easily dismissed study. It involved 78 different clinical trials and nearly 300,000 human participants.
That's huge.
The finding was unambiguous. Beta-carotene and vitamin E supplements actually increase all-cause mortality.
Wait, they increase the chance of dying. How is that even possible if antioxidants are supposed to be the good guys?
Because the body is a highly complex, balanced system. Free radicals cause stress, yes, but your body actually needs a certain amount of that stress for cellular signaling and immune function.
Right.
If you flood the system with mega doses of antioxidants, you obliterate that natural signaling. In fact, some major trials, like the famous CARROT trial, had to be halted early because the participants taking the high-dose vitamins were developing excess lung cancer.
Oh my gosh.
Another trial found more prostate cancer with high-dose vitamin E. The intervention caused the harm.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the young plasma infusion, the highly publicized father-son-grandfather blood swap.
The FDA has been very, very clear on this. In 2019, and reaffirmed recently in 2024, they stated unequivocally that there is no proven clinical benefit and there is real significant risk involved in these plasma transfusions, risks ranging from allergic reactions to circulatory overload.
Wow.
Johnson eventually discontinued the practice quietly, admitting he saw no measurable benefit.
So if we can't biohack our way out of aging with organ transplant pills, megavitamins, or plasma swaps, it leaves us with the traditional advice, right? At the gym.
Sure.
But surely, if longevity is the ultimate goal, extreme athletes must have the best, most pristine hearts in the world, right? Maximal exercise must equal maximal good.
That is the logical trap that catches almost everyone. The data reveals a very clear, undeniable U-shaped curve when it comes to exercise.
A U-shaped curve.
Yes. One major study showed that people who accumulate over 2,000 lifetime hours of high-intensity endurance training actually raise their risk of a dangerous heart condition called lone atrial fibrillation by nearly fourfold.
Fourfold. Just from running or cycling too much.
Yes. Meanwhile, moderate exercise volume was highly protective. It's the bottom of that U shape where you want to be.
Right.
But pushing it to the extreme right side of the curve causes physical, structural changes to the heart, specifically coronary calcification and myocardial fibrosis.
What does myocardial fibrosis actually mean for the heart mechanically?
Well, the heart is a muscle, and like any muscle, it relies on being pliable and elastic to pump efficiently. Think of a brand new, highly elastic rubber band.
Okay.
Myocardial fibrosis is essentially the formation of scar tissue inside the heart muscle. So instead of a flexible rubber band, parts of the heart become stiff, hard, and unyielding. The heart is not immune to wear and tear, and extreme endurance training accelerates that scarring.
The source uses a brilliant analogy to explain this U-shaped curve that seems to govern almost all these biological interventions.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Think of health interventions like salt in cooking. If you use absolutely zero salt, the dish is completely flat, bland, and lifeless. That's the harm of deficiency or disuse.
But if you add just the right pinch of salt, the moderate zone, the bottom of the U curve, everything improves.
Right.
The flavors open up. You reach maximum biological benefit with minimal risk. To understand the ceiling, we have to look at the work of Professor Leonard Hayflick. He was a legendary biogerontologist who passed away recently in 2024.
Okay.
But back in 1961, he made a discovery that completely overturned the reigning scientific dogma of his time.
What were scientists believing before 1961? Because my assumption was always that cells just break down.
Actually, the prevailing belief for decades, largely due to a flawed but famous experiment with the chicken heart in the early 20th century, was that human cells, if kept in perfect conditions in a lab with the right nutrients, could divide infinitely.
Really?
Yeah. The scientific consensus was that cells were essentially immortal, and that aging was just a result of external damage or disease.
Wow. So they thought immortality was the baseline. But Hayflick proved them wrong.
Completely wrong. He demonstrated in the lab that normal human fetal cells have a hard, unyielding stop.
Okay.
They divide roughly 40 to 60 times, and then they permanently cease dividing. They enter a state called senescence.
And that biological boundary is now famously known as the Hayflick limit.
Yes, and it became a foundational stone in the modern biology of aging. It proved that aging is not some external disease you catch from the environment.
Right.
It's an intrinsic, universal loss of molecular fidelity that happens at the cellular level. It's programmed into the hardware. Because of this, Hayflick was notoriously skeptical of the modern anti-aging industry.
I can imagine.
He flatly stated that aging cannot be cured because it isn't a disease to begin with. It is a fundamental property of biology.
And the source highlights this mind-blowing statistic from Hayflick that completely recontextualizes how we think about medicine.
Yeah, this is a big one.
He calculated that even if human medicine achieved a literal, unprecedented miracle, if we woke up tomorrow and had simultaneously cured cancer, heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, literally every single leading cause of death, human life expectancy would only rise by about 15 years.
That statistic usually shocks people.
It shocked me.
But it makes perfect sense when you understand his limit. Because underneath all those specific, localized diseases, the baseline machinery of the body is still winding down.
Right.
The molecular fidelity is still fading. The Hayflick limit is still operating in the background. Because of this, he placed the absolute maximum theoretical human lifespan at around 125 years.
And the demographic reality entirely backs him up. We have the famous, heavily verified case of Joan Comon from France.
Right.
She died in 1997 at the age of 122 years and 164 days. And since 1997, despite all the billions of dollars poured into biotech, despite AI and genome sequencing, no verified human being has even come within 3 years of her record.
The maximum reported age at death has essentially plateaued.
Yeah.
While there is some academic debate about whether we might inch a tiny bit closer to 125 late in this century, the broad consensus among gerontologists is clear. The ceiling is real, and it is structural. We are not going to live to 150.
Which leads to a massive pivot in how we should think about this entire topic. If we can't really move the finish line much further out, what should we be focusing our time, money, and energy on?
We should be focusing on the trajectory of how we reach that finish line. This is where we bring in Dr. James Fries from Stanford and his highly influential hypothesis from 1980, which is called the compression of morbidity.
The source has a great visual for this, and for anyone listening, this completely changes the paradigm.
It really does.
Imagine your life as a long bar on a graph. The typical modern trajectory is that you have healthy years up to, say, your early 60s. And then, unfortunately, you enter a 20 or 21-year period of chronic illness, decline, and disability before you finally pass away around 83.
It's a very long, very painful, shaded segment at the end of the bar. It's decades of managing pill organizers, enduring endless specialist visits, and slowly losing your independence.
But Fries argued that a healthy lifestyle doesn't necessarily stretch the entire bar longer to age 150. Instead, it pushes the healthy, vibrant portion much further to the right. Instead of spending your 70s and 80s in a slow, agonizing fade, you stay sharp. You're hiking at 85. You're playing on the floor with your grandkids at 90. And then at 95, the system just rapidly shuts down over a few months. It's trading a 20-year twilight for a 20-year victory lap.
That is the essence of it. The goal isn't just adding years to life, it's adding life to those years. It's about squeezing the sickness into the briefest possible window right at the end.
Here's where it gets really interesting. James Fries didn't just publish this data in an ivory tower, he actually lived it.
He did.
He ran 500 miles a year for most of his adult life. He died in 2021 at the age of 83, and a colleague famously described him as the opposite of a self-help quack. He didn't promise anyone eternal life. He just used the hard data to show us how to have a much better quality of life until the very end.
So if the ceiling is set by Hayflick, and the goal is the compression of morbidity set by Fries, the ultimate practical question remains, how do we actually do it?
Right.
Our sources pit two legendary doctors against each other to answer this exact question. The exercise guy versus the diet guy.
Right. This is the ultimate showdown. In the blue corner, we have Dr. Walter Bortz. He was another Stanford professor, often called the grandfather of lifestyle medicine.
Yes.
And his entire philosophy is based on one word: movement.
Dr. Bortz argued that our biological birthright, our natural factory-issued warranty as humans, is roughly 100 healthy years.
Okay.
And he firmly believed that most of us void that warranty prematurely, not because of some unavoidable genetic disease, but through sheer disuse.
He literally coined the term disuse syndrome in a 1984 medical paper.
He did.
He looked at modern sedentary culture where you sit in cars to commute to jobs where we sit at desks, and he said, This is why we are fragile. This is why we are depressed. This is why we age prematurely. We just stop moving the machinery.
And his prescription to fix disuse syndrome was beautifully, radically simple. He said it was cheap, safe, accessible, and highly effective.
Just move.
You just have to move your body every single day. Force the system to adapt. He practiced what he preached too. He ran 45 marathons in his lifetime, including finishing the Boston Marathon when he was 83 years old.
83. Most 83-year-olds struggle with stairs, and he's running Boston.
Incredible.
And he was decades ahead of his time on the biohacking front, too. He explicitly warned that we aren't going to find miracles in youth pills or physical gadgetry. He said, and I love this quote, "The length of life is determined by its content."
That is a very direct, profound answer to Dr. Emanuel's dinner party provocation about why one would want to live to 150.
Right.
Bortz is essentially saying the value is in the content and utility of the years, not the raw accumulation of them.
Okay, so that's the exercise first school, move or die. But then in the red corner, we have Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He represents the nutrition first school, and he has a major fundamental objections to the runner's mentality.
Fuhrman is the architect of what he calls nutritarian eating, and his entire philosophy can be compressed into a very simple, elegant mathematical equation, H equals N over C. Health equals the nutrients delivered divided by the calories consumed.
It's all about nutrient density per calorie. And he has this great memorable acronym for the foods that deliver the highest nutrient density. GBMMES.
GBMBS.
That stands for greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. His whole philosophy is that the salad isn't the appetizer you suffer through to get to the steak. The salad is the main dish.
And he sets this in direct opposition to the SAD, which appropriately stands for the Standard American Diet.
Oh, sad.
Right. The Standard American Diet is incredibly calorie-rich but devastatingly nutrient-poor. The SAD is engineered in food labs to make you crave it, to hit your bliss point, not to nourish your cellular machinery.
Yeah.
Fuhrman argues for a complete cultural mindset shift. We must eat to live, whereas the modern world currently lives to eat.
Okay, I hear that, but let me champion a lot of listeners right now. So there's the runners out there. What about the furnace theory?
Yeah.
This is the idea that if I run 5 miles a day, or I do a massive CrossFit session, my metabolic furnace runs so hot that I can eat whatever I want.
The classic excuse.
Right. I earned the pizza. I earned the ice cream. Think of Michael Phelps eating 10,000 calories of pancakes and pasta while training for the Olympics. If you burn it, the fuel doesn't matter, right?
This is the massive, unavoidable collision between the two schools of thought. And on this point, when synthesizing the clinical evidence and the long-term data, Dr. Fuhrman is correct.
Oh, man.
The furnace theory ultimately fails. You cannot outrun your fork.
You really can't exercise away a bad diet.
You cannot. We actually saw this in the extreme endurance data we discussed earlier regarding the U-shaped curve.
Oh, right.
You have these extreme athletes burning prodigious amounts of calories, but if their diet is poor, if they are fueling that furnace with ultra-processed foods, simple sugars, and bad fats, they still present with advanced coronary calcification and arterial plaque. Exercise is undeniably fantastic for insulin sensitivity and mental health, but it does not launder the physiological damage of ultra-processed foods. Nutrient quality matters entirely independent of your odometer.
Wow. So Fuhrman wins the diet versus exercise debate. Nutrition is the undisputed king.
Not entirely, and this is where the nuance is critical. Because Fuhrman's own program, when taken to its strictest, most rigorous extremes, falls victim to the exact same U-shaped curve we discussed with Bryan Johnson's interventions.
Right, because at its most rigorous, Fuhrman's diet demands 0 added oil, 0 added salt, and has very long lists of strictly excluded foods.
And that level of dietary rigor pushes people into the far right side of the curve. It risks turning into a recognized psychological condition called orthorexia.
Orthorexia.
Yes, an unhealthy, paralyzing obsession with eating perfectly healthy food. When your meals become entirely medicalized, when you literally cannot eat at a restaurant or share a normal, spontaneous dinner with your family because the menu violates your protocol, you are trading social connection for dietary perfection.
Which isolates you. It physically and emotionally divides the dinner table.
Yeah.
So where does the Healthy 100 Years newsletter land on all this? Because we have 2 incredibly convincing doctors with massive caveats.
They land firmly in what they call the sane middle as a synthesis of both.
Okay.
You take Fuhrman-Era's focus on nutrient density, a produce-forward, whole food, Mediterranean, or blue zone style of eating, but you combine that with Bortz's absolute demand for daily natural movement to prevent disuse syndrome.
But you leave room for Dr. Manuel's occasional ice cream.
Exactly. You keep the ice cream because the ice cream represents the shared table.
Right.
It represents joy. It's common sense, no extremes. It's as a lifestyle that can actually be sustained for a century in the company of other people, rather than alone in a hyperbaric chamber.
Notice how that shared table concept keeps coming up.
Yeah.
It turns out, who is sitting at that table with you might be the most powerful, evidence-based biohack of all. And you can't buy it.
This raises an incredibly important question about how we define health interventions in the first place. And the newsletter uses a fascinating, unconventional method to explore it.
Yeah, this part was wild.
They didn't just look at clinical trials, they looked at the comment section of the New York Times article written about Bryan Johnson.
The internet comment section. Usually a terrifying, toxic place.
True. But in this specific case, 755 readers basically conducted an open, distributed peer review of Johnson's immortality project. And what's remarkable is that this collective lay wisdom perfectly, almost exactly mirrored the most advanced conclusions of the gerontology literature.
The commenters figured out instinctively what the scientists spent decades and millions of dollars proving.
Exactly.
They had people in their 80s commenting that Johnson's obsessive quest completely lacked joy and fun, and that chronic stress about your health is a killer in its own right.
Right.
And they had people pointing out that avoiding ultra-processed food and getting decent sleep isn't a biohack. It's just basic common sense that your grandmother knew.
But the most resonant, repetitive theme from those 755 commenters was that the real hardship of aging isn't death itself, it's outliving your friends.
Wow.
It is the profound isolation. And the hard clinical data validates this fear in staggering terms.
For anyone listening who has ever felt guilty for skipping a marathon training session or a strict meal prep to go to a friend's birthday dinner, the data we are about to discuss is actually giving you permission to eat the cake. Let's talk about that data because it is sobering.
The source points to a massive landmark meta-analysis by a researcher named Holt Lundstad. This study looked at roughly 3.4 million participants across multiple countries.
3.4 million.
Huge sample size. And the findings. Loneliness increases your risk of mortality by 26%.
Wow.
Social isolation increases it by 29%, and simply living alone increases your mortality risk by 32%.
Those are massive numbers. That's a third higher risk of dying just from being alone.
Public health officials have looked at this data and compared the mortality risk of severe social disconnection to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
15 cigarettes.
It is more dangerous than obesity or physical inactivity. On the flip side, strong social connection raises your survival odds by roughly 50%.
And then there is the famous Harvard study of adult development directed by Robert Waldinger. They have been tracking the exact same cohort of people for 87 years. It is the longest experiment ever run on human flourishing.
And after 87 years of continuous data collection, measuring everything from brain scans to blood work to interviews, Waldinger summarized the entire findings in one single sentence. Good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Period.
That good.
In fact, their data showed that how satisfied a person was in their relationships at age 50 was a better predictor of their physical health at age 80 than their midlife cholesterol levels were.
Wait, relationship satisfaction at 50 predicted health at 80 better than cholesterol levels?
Yes.
That is stunning. It completely reframes what we should be tracking.
So what does this all mean for the people who actually wrote this newsletter, an estate planning law firm? Why is a lawyer writing about loneliness, diet, and cholesterol? Because for families trying to build lasting wealth and legacy, health is capital. The firm treats the health quotient, the HQ, as the absolute foundational layer of an intergenerational endowment.
Okay.
And just like financial capital, health habits either compound positively across generations, setting up the kids for success, or they dissipate, turn into chronic disease, and bankrupt the family's potential.
This brings us back to the most jarring, almost dystopian image in the whole Bryan Johnson saga.
Oh, yeah.
The plasma swap.
Yeah.
You have a father putting an IV needle into his teenage son, extracting his plasma, and pumping it into his own body. It is the ultimate transactional view of health. He is treating youth as a fungible asset, a literal substance to be pumped from one vessel to another.
And as we know, it failed. It carried FDA-warned risks and provided zero measurable benefit. The source beautifully contrasts that sterile, engineered transactional pathway with the natural pathway of intergenerational health transfer, the one that actually works and has worked for millennia.
And what does that natural transfer look like? Because you can't put culture in a syringe.
It looks like elders modeling behavior through daily presence. It as the walking pace a family sets when they go for a hike together.
Yeah.
It as the types of conversations had at the dinner table. It's demonstrating in real time how to handle stress with grace, how to remain curious about the world, how to laugh. Children absorb the physical and emotional culture of a family.
Culture compounds. Plasma does not.
Exactly. When you transfer those habits, the natural movement, the whole foods, the deep social ties, you are transmitting the massive life-extending effect sizes discovered by Bortz and Fries and Waldinger directly down to the next generation.
Wow.
It is the most financially rational thing a family can do because it actively compresses morbidity, reduces years of incredibly expensive long-term medical care, and keeps elders present at the table to govern and mentor their descendants.
To make this entirely actionable for the listener, the law firm outlines a 4-stage framework for prudent self-maintenance. It's basically a hierarchy of what you should actually spend your time and money on, starting from the base.
Stage 1 is foundational. This is mandatory for everyone immediately. It's the unsexy stuff that works. Whole foods, natural daily movement, 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep, and active, meaningful social connection.
Right.
These are the interventions with the highest proven biological benefit and absolutely zero iatrogenic risk.
Stage 2 is sensible screening. Go get your colonoscopy, get your mammogram, follow the established medical guidelines.
Yes.
But do not measure every single molecule in your body just because the technology exists to do so, because it leads to crushing anxiety and chasing phantom illnesses, exactly like Johnson chasing his low iron while entirely missing the real disease.
Stage 3 is the engineered interventions. The off-label immunosuppressants, the megadose supplements, the extreme diets, the plasma infusions.
The risky stuff.
Very risky. The firm's advice here is blunt and cautious. The burden of proof is entirely on the intervention.
Yeah.
Avoid these entirely unless you are enrolled in a heavily monitored institutional clinical trial. The risk of the U-shaped curve is too high.
And finally, stage 4 is the family endowment, prioritizing presence and relationship building across generations, making sure the culture you pass down to your kids is one of vibrant health span, not neurotic paranoia about death.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire thesis of the newsletter is that you cannot wire health to the next generation in a lump sum, and you certainly can't transmit it through an IV line. It has to be lived together.
As we wrap up this deep dive, the newsletter leaves us with a truly beautiful, grounding anecdote from the New York Times article that kicked this all off.
It's a great story.
The reporter who wrote the piece didn't give the final word to Bryan Johnson or his millions. She gave it to her own mother, a Greek woman named Calliope, who was 97 years old.
Calliope is a living, breathing example of everything the clinical literature recommends. At 97, she doesn't track her biomarkers, but she still walks to the market every day.
Yeah.
She still does math in her head to keep her mind sharp. She maintains her deep social ties by actively calling the people she can no longer physically visit.
And most importantly, she has accepted her life. She isn't fighting a bitter, unwinnable war against aging. She actually quotes the famous poem Ithaca by C.P. Cavafy, which is all about how the journey itself and what you learn along the way is the true prize, not simply avoiding the final destination.
It's a profound contrast, and it leaves us with a deeply provocative thought to consider. We look at someone spending millions of dollars, tracking every heartbeat, replacing their plasma, utterly terrified of the end.
Right.
And we have to ask, is this obsessive, highly engineered quest to avoid death actually a symptom of a profound disconnection from the very things that make life worth living in the first place? If you view your body merely as a machine to be hacked, engineered, and perpetually optimized, do you risk losing your essential humanity in the process?
It's a question worth chewing on long after this conversation ends. Because as Calliope knew, the goal isn't just to be alive on a spreadsheet for 150 years, it's to be usable, present, and deeply connected for the years you actually have.
Yeah.
Led by Jack Russo, Computer Law Group LLP is a bespoke business litigation and founder-friendly boutique law firm with offices and licensed attorneys in Silicon Valley, New York, and Tampa Bay. And you can reach Jack at jack@computerlaw.com and his team at www.computerlaw.com, where the newsletter we referred to is published in detail and readily available commitment-free with no paywalls or other charges.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.